Hi, I'm Paul Hindle, reporting at Finovate Europe in London, and I'm joined by Jane Barber from NatWest. How are you?
I'm very well, Paul. On such a lovely day as well.
I know, yeah, a bit of sun in London for a change.
Exactly.
Always good. So maybe you could just start by introducing yourself and your role at NatWest.
Yes. I work in our payments business, which is the technical payments business that supports all of our customer-facing businesses. And I work in a team that's called Market Development, where we cover strategic insights into payments, so how the payments landscape is changing. We cover the engagement into the trade associations, so UK Finance, the Payments Association and others, and also the regulatory side of payments, so our engagement particularly with the Payment Systems Regulator, which oversees payment schemes and the participants in them.
So you're going to be speaking on a panel discussing how harnessing new tech can help in the battle against financial crime. So what would you say the key challenges facing banks there when it comes to fraud and maybe payment-related fraud as your specialty?
Yeah, we're sort of looking really, I suppose, at technology that's going to, in fact, change the game. What will that make a real difference? Because we've all got lots of technology solutions that are doing things at the moment to counter financial crime. But particularly around fraud, the big thing which everybody sort of knows about is what's called authorised push payment fraud, where you've authorised a payment to make to somebody that you think is genuine but is probably a fraudster. And that could be frauds where you're coerced to do it, or the police or the bank is being impersonated to that customer and they believe that they're making a payment to a genuine person. And then you've got ones like purchase scams, where you're buying something on a marketplace. You haven't really thought, is that a good bargain for those trainers, for example, and you end up finding you've got no goods. And that's grown and grown, so that at the moment that type of fraud is higher than card payment fraud, and that was the first time last year that had actually happened.
Right. So what methods then and technology are you employing to kind of tackle this fraud?
Well, we've invested in technology in our fraud prevention side, which is separate to the payment side of the business, for quite some time. And that could be giving us behavioural insights to say whether, when you're making that payment, does it look like the normal pattern of somebody who's not making the payment normally, not being coached to make a payment, when the patterns are quite different as you stop, or you have to look down at or listen to what's being said and then type the figures in. So it's quite different, and we've learned quite a lot from that, because that allows us then to use intervention to try and break the spell, which is quite hard really for people who really do believe that they're making a genuine payment, or that they're helping to stop a crime, like bank staff committing fraud themselves.
Sure. And so what are the hurdles then, I guess, for banks and other financial institutions when it comes to implementing these fraud stopping technologies?
I don't think there's particular hurdles. It's the same as any sort of technology investment. Why do we need to do it? What will it add, or what will it prevent in the case of fraud? What will it allow us to do that we couldn't do before? Is it a replacement for something that we no longer need because this is better? And is there the budget and the resource to implement it at that particular time? And that's the same really as anything else. But I have to say, given what's happening, we've had to focus on this a lot, because actually there is just so much fraud about.
Sure. And how difficult then is it to balance consumer operability and speed of use against kind of the tackling fraud as well and keeping them safe?
Yeah, so as consumers, we've all got to the stage, we use our mobiles, we use the app, we want the payments to be made like that. We've done everything right. I've worked on confirmation of payee, and people get very frustrated if they get a no match and they want to override it. But if they're making a payment of, £10,000, how do we know they're not being defrauded? Should we stop that? Should we intervene? And those are the sort of things that we have to do. We have to try and sort of work out what's the pattern of payments for that customer. Is it aberrant? Is it something they wouldn't normally make? Should we intervene? So it is. And then there's the regulatory considerations, which says we shouldn't stop a customer making a payment if they're sort of of sound mind and whatever else, and they can make the payment. But of course, if it goes wrong, we then have to reimburse them if they've done everything they could to stop the payment. So, it's a very tricky balancing act.
And what's your take then on alternative payment methods like cryptocurrencies and stuff like that?
It's funny on cryptocurrencies, because it depends what you mean. If you mean crypto assets, which, they fluctuate, they're not really a currency, so something like Bitcoin. we've seen growth in fraud there, particularly through the exchanges or some of the exchanges. And it's also that customers generally are less aware of the risks. And so that's quite an issue around it. They don't know if they bought something, they don't know what they've bought, and so on. They don't know how the wallets work and so on. So that's quite tricky. If you talk about digital currencies, like sort of central bank digital currencies, which the Bank of England is considering, should we have one in the UK? There's a lot of industry work going on to say, should we have one? What would be the benefits of having a digital currency? You know, could you tokenize payments? Could you link those types of currencies better to make cross-border payments in a sort of like retail payments moving cross-border more quickly? So that would create a better experience. It might also increase fraud, of course, or moving money out of the country. So I think that one's got a little bit of time to run. The Bank of England suggests sort of end of the decade, you know, the second half of the decade, and we're fast approaching the middle of the decade. So it probably will be if they take off in that second half of the 2020s.
Okay, and on that front, then look into the future. What kind of trends do you see in the payment space?
Well, I think stuff on digital currencies and crypto is a continuing trend. I don't think that's going to go away. We just have to think about it a bit more and to understand where it's going to go. And of course, we're expecting the likes of the Treasury to want to regulate stable coins. So it's the privately issued equivalent of a central bank digital currency. We know that the FCA has been taking action on some of the entities providing the exchanges, although they're very concerned that they can't regulate them fully end to end and they don't have the full insights into them. So they're obviously concerned about that. So we need to see how that goes. I think what we'll continue to see is, although everybody's committed to retaining access to cash, how much will cash continue to fall and what will we do? And will people become more digitally literate and therefore happily move away from cash more, so it becomes a real backstop if things go wrong, potentially? And what will happen then to how people access payments generally? More people are using mobile apps rather than going online now, and that's of course been one of the challenges in the pandemic. People who've not normally been online have been going online, they're not as savvy, so they might have been more likely to have been scammed, for example. So there's a lot still to think about. And of course the other thing we are sort of seeing happening is the development of a digital identity, which Bayes is leading on as sort of talking about working with a partner at the moment. And that might make another big difference. Can you sort of prove the identity of who you are and maybe who the person you're paying is, which might make a great difference. So I think there's a lot to think about and to continue to work on.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Jane. It's been great having your insights, and thanks for...
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Paul.